Thanks very much for what we thought was a good debate. It was an interesting debate. There's a couple of things just in general you should maybe be looking at for future, like whenever you're coming to competitions like this again, and maybe for the later rounds. I would advise keeping up to date on all of your political issues. Just like, reading your newspapers every day, reading your atlases from time to time. Just kind of making sure that what you're saying is grounded in the current rather than accidentally grounded in the past because you aren't up to date on your knowledge. Okay guys, but apart from that, I'm not one of these judges who likes to save the adjudication for the end to make people squirm. But in this case, I think that maybe it might be a benefit to everyone just to walk our way through it before we give the results. Okay, so we'll start off with first prop here. First prop, you had an interesting, slightly quirky approach to the motion in question. What we say is we give you credit for that. We say there was issues with role fulfillment in the fact that you took on a much greater burden than you really had to in this case. If you know what I mean, you could have ran it an awful lot easier for yourself and probably easier for the judges to give you the result you would have wanted. It's all about treating us like children and giving us what we want and giving the debate what the debate wants. There's a couple of issues with that there. You stood up and it was an interesting interpretation, but you defended it admirably, and fair dues to you lads, you just wouldn't let it die. Unfortunately, we think that it did eventually kind of sink to the opposition coming from first opposition. I hope that's okay for yourselves. So I'm going to move on to the second team, the first opposition team. Well guys, basically I'd say the only criticism we'd have of you would have been, you'd be the prime examples of this this lack of information as such. It wasn't so much that your arguments were misguided, but the reasoning behind them was. What we feel is that, possibly due to a lack of, up-to-date information on politics, in particular, misunderstanding the role of non-governmental organizations, and really the use of a couple of questionable examples, we thought kind of undercut the strength of what you were bringing to the debate. Second proposition, in fact, we love, and I mean love, when people, take the hard line. I think balls to the wall is the way to do it every time. Even if they're poor peasants in the street, firebomb them if they're in your way. That's the way forward. The only problem with this is, when you're trying to take the hard line, when you're making an argument like you did, be very careful with the language you use. The language you use can be misconstrued sometimes, and in other times it's hard not to see it for what it appears to be and is. Unfortunately, we're going to have a little chat with you about this. Myself, the CA, and our equity officer, Mr. Tutu. We're going to have a little chat to you about it. But like I say, whenever you're talking to Mr. Tutu especially, be very careful about the way you phrase things if this is anything to go by. Second op. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because we do feel that although you didn't bring a huge amount more to the debate in terms of information or arguments, what we feel is what you did bring us was very well put together, very well presented. We think, the packaging that your 7 minutes in front of us, the form it took, was pleasing to the judges in a very realistic way. We think, you convinced us an awful lot with just, the rambunctious way that you kind of insisted your points were there. Like the way that you just put them out there, and like we couldn't help but notice how strong and how firm those points were. What we feel essentially is that you won the debate, but moreover than that, I know I'm not meant to get personal on this feedback, but I do remember a number of years ago judging you guys in a schools round, and let me tell you, your points have really developed since then, and really, like, you know, that kind of improvement makes me think that you're someone to keep an eye on. Like if you want some personal feedback after this, like I'd be very happy to spend a bit of time with you guys out in the bar, maybe after the last round or something. I'm sure the gentleman here would love to come and chat to you. I'd advise talking to me first, maybe those guys second, I don't know. But like we'd love to give you a little bit of one-to-one after this, if that's okay with yourselves.
A couple of well-defined points each.
Yeah. Oh, that was just god awful.
Yeah, no, you're right. Top room's got to be better. I see better stuff. Tits.
How long should I wait before I add him on Facebook?